Welcome to Clue 5 of our mystery quilt. You can push pause while this page is on the screen, or take a screenshot and print it so that you have a copy nearby while you're doing your cutting. This week we'll be cutting from fabric A and the background fabric. Make sure that you get your fabric key out so that you cut from the correct fabrics. From fabric A, you will need 2 strips that are 2 7/8 inch by the width of fabric. From those strips, you will cut 24 squares that are 2 7/8 by 2 7/8. You will bisect each of those squares once to make 48 triangles. For making some of these smaller cuts, I like to use a smaller ruler. This one is a Creative Grids 3.5 by 6.5 inch ruler, and it's excellent for cutting the squares off the strip and then also from cutting corner to corner to get my triangles. From the background fabric, you will need to cut 3 strips that are 2.5 inches by the width of the fabric. From those 3 strips, you will need to cut 48 squares that are 2.5 by 2.5 inches. When you are done cutting the squares, you will need to set them aside so that you don't accidentally cut them during the next step in the process. From the background fabric, you also need to cut 2 strips that are 2 7/8 by the width of the fabric. From these strips, you will cut 24 squares that are 2 7/8 by 2 7/8 inch. You will bisect each of these squares once for 48 triangles. Before sewing, I like to make sure I get my pieces ready. I make sure to put all my pieces right sides together and stack them up so that they're easy to grab. They don't have to be perfect at this point, they just need to be ready to sew. Sew your triangles together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. get your blade saver thread cutter out to cut those pieces apart. It's time to press. We will be pressing to the dark fabric, so you want to take a little time to make sure that fabric is on top, get all your pieces arranged, and that will make the pressing go a lot faster. These squares need to measure 2.5 by 2.5. So I always trim to make sure I've got the exact measurement. Sometimes I'm just cutting off the dog ears. Sometimes it's a little bit more depending on my seam allowance and how accurate that was. So get your pieces trimmed to 2.5 by 2.5. I'm using my block lock ruler, but you could use any ruler that has the center line going from corner to corner so that you can trim accurately on that seam. Now it's time to sew the background square to the 2.5-inch triangle unit. I usually prepare these one at a time at the sewing machine so that I know I'm feeding them in the right direction to follow the diagram exactly. Otherwise, I tend to use my seam ripper a lot. As I was sewing this section, my machine started to sound a little funny, so I thought I better find out what was going on. I took the needle and the foot off, took the plate out, and I found quite a lot of lint. So I had to spend a little time with my tweezers getting all of it out of there. The machine was turned off, just so you know. If it's been a while since you've cleaned your machine or replaced a needle, I suggest you take a few minutes right now to get that done. Your machine will be sewing a lot better afterwards, and it's always a good idea to have a new needle. Okay, so that's an embarrassing amount of lint, but I do sew a lot. I've got my machine wiped down. I'm going to put the plate back in. I'm going to put a new needle in. And then I'll put the foot back on and I'll be ready to sew. All is well. Back to sewing my pieces together. Now, once I'm done with this, I'm going to cut them apart using my blade saver thread cutter. Now this time when we press, we are going to press towards the square. So it'll be a little different. We're not pressing towards the dark, we're pressing towards the background fabric. Back to the sewing machine to sew the unit you just completed with the unit you made in step 1. They should look exactly like the diagram, so I usually try to put my pieces together as I'm sewing them through the machine so that I don't accidentally line them up the wrong way. This blade saver thread cutter sure does come in handy. I don't know what I did before I started using it. Once again to the ironing board. Press toward the larger rectangle piece. Get those pieces stored away in a bag with the other pieces, and we will see you again next week. Thanks for watching.